Noise reduction is an important detail to consider when editing your photos in Photoshop. Today with digital cameras, noise can be quite evident, especially when shooting in low lighting conditions. Now, noise alone can be the influencing factor in whether or not a photograph is successful or just considered as poor quality. Now, inside Photoshop, there are several options that you can choose from to assist in the removal of noise, dust, and even scratches from an image. And depending on what you're actually trying to attempt to remove, will actually determine which tool is the right tool for the job. But before we get started, if you're working with Adobe's Camera Raw, please utilize the noise removal sliders inside the details panel, as the more that you can actually do to the raw file itself in the actual raw conversion process, the better quality of results that you're actually going to achieve. So moving on, the two filters that you want to test out for your own noise removal are located in the main navigational menu underneath Filter, Noise, and then what you'll find is you'll find Dust and Scratches, and then you'll also find Reduce Noise. Now, before we proceed, as you can see, I've currently got two photographs open. I've got an image from a previous tutorial that was actually quite underexposed, and we actually used the HDR exposure adjustment in order to sort of bring it back to life and actually fix up its density. And then I also have an image across here which is of an older photograph that has a lot of dust, a lot of scratches, and a lot of sort of imperfections. So we're going to have a look at these, both the dust and scratches and the remove noise adjustment in Photoshop for both of these examples. So let's just quickly zoom in on this particular image. Now, this image was taken, and it was actually taken underexposed on a 20D, a Canon 20D. So as you can see, clearly it has quite a bit of noise overall in the image. Now, the first thing we're going to actually take a look at is the dust and scratches filter. So if we go up to filter, back to noise, you'll find dust and scratches. Now, essentially, dust and scratches provides an adjustment that is only controlled by two sliders, the radius and the threshold. Now, the radius, if you start to actually drag the radius left to right or enter a value in the actual text box, what you'll find is that the radius actually determines the size of the actual area search for dissimilar pixels. Now, obviously, a radius, that is actually quite high, with a threshold set at 0, does some pretty drastic adjustments to your image. But as you can see, just setting it 1 pixel, and then if we just turn the preview on and off, you'll notice that it's sort of made the image a lot softer and sort of reduced that overall grainy noisiness of the image. Now, you also have the threshold. So when you first start off, you want to have the threshold at 0. But as you actually progress and actually add a certain radius to your dust and scratches dialog box, what you want to do is you want to play around with the threshold or the levels value that is here. Now, the threshold determines how dissimilar the pixels should be before they are eliminated. And you'll notice that they primarily affect levels or the values between 0 and 128, more so than that of the higher values up to 255. So if you actually add in, so let's add in about, say, 5 pixels as our radius amount, and you can see it's done quite an adjustment on our image. If we start to increase the threshold in levels, you'll notice that it actually starts to balance out certain areas. So it'll actually start to remove the adjustment with regards to those dissimilar pixels and start to affect areas that are primarily within 0 to 128 levels, which is primarily from the shadow, from the midtones down to the shadows, if you're thinking about it in terms of those particular values. So that's quite an interesting adjustment that you can play around with, and it actually works quite well, especially with scanned photographs or that you actually intend on restoring. So let's take a look at dust and scratches for this particular image across here. And what we'll do here is we'll just quickly We'll zoom in on an area that's really quite affected by dust and some of these imperfections, as you can see here. So there's a lot of dust in this image. So now let's a lot of dust and scratches. So now let's just go to filter, back to noise, and we'll go back to dust and scratches. Now, with a simple radius of 1 pixel, you'll see that automatically it's actually removed a lot of those little specks that you saw, which are the little dust from the original scan. So if I actually turn the preview off and then turn the preview on again, you'll notice it's removed quite a lot of them, but it's still actually retained a lot of the detail in the photograph. So this can be extremely useful for adjusting images that are, older photographs that you intend on restoring. So dust and scratches does a relatively good job, usually at a very low threshold setting and also at a low radius amount as well. But if you're looking for more control with regards to noise removal, dust, and even scratches, then I recommend that you check out Reduce Noise, which actually gives you a far more advanced set of control sliders. So let's now take a look at that. So we'll just cancel this adjustment and we'll go back to our original image that is quite noisy, and we're going to go up to Filter and we'll go down to Noise, Reduce Noise. So as you can see, there are quite a few adjustments in the Reduce Noise window, from the strength, preserving details, reducing color noise, sharpening details, and even removing JPEG compression artifacts. So the Reduce Noise filter can be a little bit overwhelming at first glance. Now, the thing you'll notice here is that you have a basic option and an advanced option. Now, the advanced option is actually pretty neat because it actually allows you to adjust per channel the actual strength of your noise reduction or your adjustment to your image. So you can go in and specify a particular channel, whether it be red, green, or blue, and then actually choose the strength of adjustment for that particular channel. So in some cases, especially when you're shooting under certain lighting conditions, that may be warm light or cool light, or just the overall color of an image or the color of a subject matter in the image, I may actually end up with more noise just primarily because of that particular color channel. So sometimes you'll find like the blue channel can be very noisy, and even the red channel, because primarily they're only getting 25% of the actual exposure in a Bayer sensor, whereas the green, there are 50% of green actual sensors in the digital camera. So essentially the red and the blue channel are going to most likely have the majority of the actual noise in your image. So what you want to do is specify one and then actually adjust accordingly, and you can sort of move around. As you can see here, you've got the noise, and you can sort of adjust the strength and also adjust how much detail you actually want to preserve in your image. So you can play around with these settings in order to get something that you're relatively happy with. Now, along with actually adjusting for each individual channel, you've got the strength setting, preserve details, and also the reduce color noise, along with the sharpen details. So as you can see, just with the default options here, just clicking on the little hand on the actual preview, you'll notice that it's given a very nice finish to this image. It's removed a lot of the luminance and color noise from the image, and it actually looks quite nice. I'd probably be inclined to reduce the strength a little bit, just so I have a little bit of texture in the image from that noise, because I tend to prefer that really sort of fine film grain look as opposed to completely digital. But overall, the results are actually quite nice. So now let's take a look at the reduce noise with regards to this photo restoration image here. So we'll go back to it, and we'll just go back into the actual reduce noise filter, bring that up. And immediately, just with the default settings, you'll notice that it's removed a lot of information there. So a lot of, you can see, especially with the edges of this photograph, you've lost a lot of detail. So what I'd want to do is essentially increase the preserved details just to sort of keep a little bit of that information. Now, I've obviously gone a little bit too far there, but you just want to play around with it essentially to get the result that you're sort of looking for. But essentially, as with any noise, dust, and scratch removal, it's very much so a visual process that's very dependent on the type of correction that you're trying to make and what you're actually trying to achieve. So unfortunately, I can't give you any magical settings or values for that matter. You'll need to actually sit down and take the time to experiment with these filters in order to achieve the results that you desire.